Buying a first camera can be an extremely overwhelming process. With so many options on the market, what do you choose? Well, today we're going to be going over the 5 most important things to look out for when picking up your first camera.
Girl, don't call my phone. I know where you been. You like to get messy when you out with your friends.
First up, we have sensor size. So this is one thing that a lot of people generally get quite confused about. So the main 2 sensor sizes available in the mirrorless market is full frame and APS-C. A full frame sensor is the same size as a 35mm film negative. So that's where that measurement comes from. And then you have your APS-C or crop sensors have a sensor size that is 1.6 times smaller than full frame. So this just means whenever you're buying any lens, you have to consider that you're getting a crop factor of 1.6 times. So it means that all your lenses are effectively going to look more zoomed in than they would do on a full frame camera. So what does that actually mean? So your full frame sensor, generally more larger pixels, and that's going to allow for better low light performance. And it also gives you a shallower depth of field with that larger area. So if you're looking here at the images that we're showing, comparing an APS-C image and a full frame image using the same settings and the same lens, you can see that you generally do get a little bit more sharpness and depth with a full frame sensor. But if you are shooting something like sports or wildlife, then picking up an APS-C camera might be the move. With that 1.6 times crop means that you actually get more reach using those lenses. So there is a big advantage there with the APS-C, and generally a lot of wildlife photographers will use APS-C sensor cameras. The other advantage of APS-C is that it's smaller and lighter. So if you are, looking for a camera that's a little easier for travel and carry around, then APS-C cameras are lighter and smaller. And the other thing is they are cheaper. Full frame sensor cameras are generally more expensive. There's more technology involved, they're larger, and also the glass that goes with it, the lenses that you buy for full frame, are also larger and heavier and more expensive. So if you're just starting out, don't be scared by this idea that if you don't buy full frame, you're not getting a good enough image quality. Plenty of photographers use APS-C cameras and get amazing results using them.
Remember, lens size isn't just about focal length. Aperture, focal range, and especially sensor size all play a role. Smaller sensors mean smaller, lighter lenses, while larger sensors require bigger, heavier glass. This is why you need to balance image quality against size and weight. A smaller APS-C setup can be far more practical for travel, while full frame delivers the ultimate image quality.
Number 2. Now, this is a point that is usually very overlooked, and that is, how does the camera feel? So we're talking about grip and weight and size. So with that, you're going to be using this camera for, potentially 5 years, 6 years in the future, and having a camera that you want to actually pick up and use is really important. So if we're looking at these cameras here, you're starting on a small APS-C camera. So this is a ZV-E10. So it's very small, it's very compact and super, super light. So if you're planning on doing something like video work on a gimbal, or you're doing sort of full day shoots out for 12 hours, then picking up something that's smaller and lighter might be a really good option. Now, personally, I prefer cameras with a larger grip. I've got quite big hands, and this camera is just way too small for me. The buttons are way too close together, and I find it quite fiddly. But then if you're looking up the line and going up for something like here, the Canon R5 II, this is a really nice fit for me. The grip is larger. I can actually, fully reach all the buttons, and that's a huge thing to consider. When you're going to be using this camera all the time, you want it to be comfortable. So really important that before you buy your camera, you can find a camera store somewhere, preferably George's, and then go and try out the camera and see how it feels, because you might regret buying something if you haven't tried it first. So hand grip is all well and good, but weight is another thing that you seriously need to consider. So when looking for a camera, it really depends on what you're going to be shooting as to how heavy you want your camera to be. So if we're looking down here at something like a ZV-E10, now this is super lightweight and super small. So if you're vlogging or traveling or doing anything like that, then a camera like this is going to be a really good option, just because it's so much smaller and lighter. And if you're holding a camera out at arm's length all day, using something like this is going to absolutely destroy your arm. So having something like this is the way to go. And then running back up through here, so you've got the Fuji here, which is an APS-C camera, so it is lighter and a little bit smaller. So if you are doing maybe a little bit more sort of portrait stuff and that sort of thing, or even weddings where you're still still going a long time, having something a little bit lighter is going to help there. Now, you know, in comparison to sort of older cameras and DSLRs, the mirrorless ranges are so much lighter than their predecessors, but it is still something serious, you know, to consider. If you're looking at something like the R5 II, it is still a pretty hefty camera, and especially if you're doing something like wildlife or sports where you've got a huge lens on the front as well, all that weight adds up. So, you know, if you are doing those sorts of things and you've got those long lenses, then maybe looking at a body that's a little bit more compact and smaller to bring that weight down could be a good option. Also, just to add, if you are shooting video as well, weight is also really important, because with most video cameras like the FX3 here, you are going to need to rig it out to use it properly. So you're going to need to add your cage and your monitor. So weight of the actual camera is a real consideration there. The third thing to consider is the lens ecosystem of your camera. Now, lenses are probably the most important part of a camera. A lot of people make the mistake of spending their entire budget on a camera body and then buying cheap lenses. And the problem with that is if you buy cheap lenses, it doesn't matter how expensive your camera body is, your image is not gonna look good. So it's something to really consider, because the ecosystem of lenses from camera to camera really differs. You know, if you look at someone like Sony, for example, they've been using the same lens mount for nearly 20 years now. So they have heaps of lens options. Whereas if you look at someone like Nikon or Canon, who very recently changed the lens mount, they don't have as many options in the lens ecosystem. So it's something really important to consider. Pricing is also a big thing as well. So different brands have very different pricing on their lenses. But the one thing I cannot recommend more is do not cheap out on your lenses, because otherwise you are just not going to be getting the image quality that your camera can provide. Picking a lens is also quite a big task. There is so many different types of lenses to choose from. So what should you go for as a first lens? You have two main types of lenses. You have your prime lenses and your zoom lenses. So zoom lenses are lenses like the 24-70, the 70-200, and they basically cover a variety of focal lengths in the one lens. Then you have your primes, which are fixed, so you have no zoom capabilities whatsoever within the lens.
Beyond prime and zooms, remember there are wide angle, telephoto, standard and professional zoom lenses, each designed for different shooting styles.
The advantages of a prime lens, generally they are sharper and they also have a lower aperture, so you're going to get a nicer depth of field and have better low light performance out of your primes. But you know, the advantage of a zoom means that you have one lens that you don't need to be changing in and out of to be able to deal with certain situations. I would highly recommend, if you are a first-time photographer and you're just getting into it, buy a zoom lens. Zoom lens is going to allow you to understand what different focal lengths achieve, how they change the look of an image. And you might find that if you're just using a prime to start with, you might get quite frustrated with the camera and not be getting the results that you want. I would not cheap out on a zoom. Something like a 24-70 f2.8, whilst it is expensive, it is a really, really solid all-around zoom and will give you super sharp images no matter where you are in that focal range.
For APS-C shooters, a great equivalent is 80 to 50 millimeters. For micro four thirds, you can look at 12 to 35. And if you want exceptional quality without spending $3,000, Sigma's 24-70s for full frame and 18-50 for APS-C are sharp, made in Japan and outstanding value.
So I'm going to take some pictures here of this 4x4 just to show you the difference with a crop lens and a full frame lens. So they're both marked as 50mm, but you'll see, well, I'll start with the full frame, it's wider, and when I put the APS-C lens on, it's going to crop in. The full frame lens, we can see all of the car and its surroundings. Now, when I switch to our crop lens, you can see I can no longer see the car surroundings, and we're a lot tighter here. So there is a big difference with your crop sensor and your full frame. So it's definitely something to consider how much width you actually lose in your image. So whilst using this crop lens, if I actually want to get the same shot that I did with the full frame, I literally have to move back, come all the way back here, and now we are as wide as we were with the full frame 50mm. So you can see there is a big difference with that crop involved. Taking a closer look at third-party lenses, there are so many options on the market, from photography lenses all the way through to cinema lenses. Now, the great thing about third-party is that they are a lot more cost-effective, so they are generally cheaper than your big-name brand lenses. But that does not mean that they lose any quality. In fact, a lot of these third-party lenses, a lot of people think, actually give better quality. So if it's a serious thing to consider with whatever camera you're looking to purchase, is that are there third-party options there, and are they any good? The other option, other than third-party, is actually adapting. So with some lenses and some cameras, you can cross-adapt, or you can use older lenses from the older mounts and adapt them onto the new cameras. So we see this quite commonly with people who had been in the DSLR world for years and collected all these lenses and didn't want to get rid of them. So instead, they bought the new body, having the new features there, and then just buy an adapter to adapt those older lenses on there.
Adapters can sometimes reduce autofocus speed or accuracy, and older DSLR lenses may not resolve enough detail for today's high-resolution mirrorless sensors. This is a great moment to consider trading in older gear for modern lenses.
A lens investment is a serious consideration because lenses long outlive cameras. An average camera lifespan is probably about 5 years, whereas a lens can last you 20, 30 years. It's a serious thing to consider when investing in lenses, knowing that you're going to spend a lot more time with them than you are your camera. The bottom line is just make sure that the brand you're looking at has plenty of lens options within a price range that you can afford. There's nothing worse than diving into a whole ecosystem to then find out that the lenses are too expensive and you're stuck with 1 or 2 lenses and you want to change, because changing brands is expensive. So it's absolutely paramount to check that the lenses within that brand fit your needs. Point number 4, now this isn't the most interesting, but it's an incredibly important one, and that is your power and media reliability. Cameras have changed so much in the last 10 years. We have so much more technology now in cameras than we did 10 years ago. You've got your electronic viewfinder and now your electronic shutter. So it's great having all these features, but they do require more power. So one of these little batteries may not last you that long, especially if you're shooting in extreme environments like hot or cold.
For example, Sony's A7 Mark V is the first in their line with significantly improved power efficiency, extending battery life. And don't forget, electronic viewfinders, especially OLED EVFs. They can use as much power as the LCD screen.
So something to consider when picking up a camera is how good its battery life is. One nice thing about mirrorless cameras though is that they can be powered by USB-C. So if you have something like a power bank, you can actually charge your camera on the go, which is a really nice feature. It's definitely worth checking out what your camera's battery life is to figure out whether for what you're shooting you need spare batteries or you need accessories like battery grips or external batteries. When looking at media on your camera, there is so many different options on the market now. So your higher end full frame cameras will now usually take CFexpress cards and SD cards. Now the difference between these two is that your CFexpress cards have way faster read and write speeds. So if you are shooting on a big full frame camera, it's definitely worth using these cards. Not only because it allows you to shoot at those higher frame rates and those higher resolutions, but also when you come to offload your footage, it's a hell of a lot quicker going through this than going through this. Last up, number 5 is going to be color science. So every single camera brand is going to give you a different look. Fujifilm, for example, pride themselves on their filmic look. Canon are really good for those portraits and skin tones, and Sony tends to be a little bit more clinical. So when you're looking at a camera, really look into how their images look and which you prefer. That is going to be the biggest difference between all these cameras that you aren't going to see on a spec sheet, is the color and how that comes across in the images and videos. As you can see from the 3 images on the screen, we're shooting under the same lighting conditions in the same framing, but the colors are very different. Colors do differ so much depending on what brand you go for, and each specializes in its own area. Another point to touch on is your LCD screen. So making sure that it's bright enough and accurate with its colors. So if you're shooting in broad daylight, you're going to need an LCD screen that is bright enough to be able to combat with the sun. Also, most LCD screens on modern mirrorless cameras are also touchscreen, which is super helpful because then you don't have to memorize where all your dials are. You can simply touch the setting you want to change and change it. Specs are all well and good, but ultimately what makes a good photo is you, the photographer. If someone's there telling you you need to spend $10,000 on a setup to take good images, it's simply not true. You can do so much nowadays with the cameras that are available. The most important thing is that you go and find an actual camera that you like. Go and try cameras, compare them yourselves, and ultimately make the decision that suits you. Let us know in the comments below what camera you were thinking of picking up, or if there's any of those who have already got a camera, let us know why you chose that one and why you love it. If you want to read any more, we've got a blog in the description below, so check that out. But that is everything. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.